Joining us now to break it all down is the Vice President for Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation, James Carafano. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
So right now, as we were saying, we have sides that support both Maduro and Juan Guaido. Let's pull up a map here. These are the countries who recognize Juan Guaido as the new leader. What can you tell us?
Well, I think the United States has actually done a remarkable job about pulling together, particularly in Latin America, an alliance of countries. Incredibly, Brazil, which has long been estranged from the U.S., working together. Colombia, which is absolutely key. And then if you think broader, remarkably, the European Union and much of Europe is solidly with the United States in support of Guaido.
But then at the same time, some of these countries may not surprise folks at home, the countries who continue to support the Nicolas Maduro regime.
Right. So you look at Russia, for example. This is all part of Putin's grand strategy, which is he doesn't have a grand strategy, but he's a meddler. He just looks for gaps and weaknesses and tries to exploit them, whether it's Ukraine or other places. Russia's long had links here in Venezuela, but they see an opportunity to kind of annoy the United States, so they support Maduro. And actually, Putin would be the most happy guy if the United States intervened, because then the United States would get dragged into a quagmire. That would be the happiest day for him ever.
Yeah, and just one more thing about Russia. They also have a major investment in Venezuela's oil industry.
They do. So they have. So this is very, very similar to Syria. The difference here is Caracas is a long way from Moscow, so Russia really can't do logistically and on the ground the kind of things they could do in Syria.
Yeah, they sent 100 military personnel to Caracas. What about Iran? Let's focus on Iran now.
Iran and all of its surrogates, particularly Hezbollah, have long had a long-established footprint in Latin America. And among other things, that is where they do a lot of their fundraising, and they get directly involved in criminal enterprises. And what's kept the Venezuelan government really in power these years isn't really the oil revenue. It's basically the kickbacks and payoffs from the transnational criminal cartels. So they use that for fundraising, and it's also their base of intelligence operations in the Western Hemisphere against the United States. So yeah, Iran would love to see the regime stick around.
Interesting. Perhaps why, in part, they've discussed opening this new flight route when airlines stopped flying to Venezuela.
Right, and they've been doing that repeatedly, and they use that to ferry stuff from the regions for themselves and others to directly to the Venezuelan government.
Right. So let's talk about Cuba. We've heard President Trump talk about Cuba and sanctions. What are their primary interests here?
Well, Cuba has long been the leader in organizing socialist Latin America against the United States, and in really being a proxy for Russian and other interests in the region. They are the main bad actor because they provide the boots on the ground for these things. So Maduro today is really held up. He's surrounded by Russians and Cubans. If he was surrounded by Venezuelan soldiers, he'd probably be thrown out of the country by now. So they have a deep interest here. And what's really funny about this is they have way overreached. I mean, I think Trump's going to come down on them like the Wrath of Khan. They're going to get more sanctions. They're going to be in worse shape than when they started under Obama. Yeah. So this is a huge strategic overreach for the Cubans that they're really going to pay a heavy price for.
When you talk about boots on the ground, some 20,000 troops on the ground from Cuba alleged to be. Finally, China.
Look, China's put many, many billions of dollars into Venezuela, like they've countries all over the place. They use it for power and influence and exploitation of resources. But the Chinese, I think, are a different actor here. They want to preserve their financial interests. They don't care who's in charge. They'll roll with the punches there. And they have bigger stakes. They're in the middle of a huge trade negotiation with the United States. I think of all of the actors, they can least afford to really butt heads with the United States. But they did help. There are reports that they helped shut down social media and broadcast media in the country. So they have been aiding the Venezuelans.
So, James, bottom line, political solution to the crisis or military one?
Well, I think it's an internal solution. I mean, this was in the military, we call it a meeting engagement. Guaido and Maduro didn't plan on May 1st being the cataclysmic day they would clash on this. Events kind of forced them into that. So both of them enter this not really knowing which way the military is going to go. Yeah. I think it gets settled internally. I don't think there's a role here for a U.S. military intervention. You cannot throw the 82nd Airborne into the middle of a civil war like this and not expect it to be a mess.
Yeah, that would be catastrophic, actually. James Carafano, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.